You ever wonder if there's like a secret language that connects people in totally different high stakes jobs? A single idea that they all just feel in their bones, even if they don't have a name for it? Well, there is, and we're going to decode it together. I mean, on the surface, absolutely nothing, right? One's saving lives, one's building houses, and the other is pushing a machine to its absolute limit. But here's the thing. They all share this deep, gut-level feel for the exact same powerful concept. And by the time we're done here, you will too. So, to solve this little puzzle, we're going to dive into each of their worlds. Think of it like a scavenger hunt for clues. And our first stop? The crazy, fast-paced world of an emergency room. For a seasoned nurse, it's not about just seeing numbers on a chart. No. It's about the story those numbers are telling. They aren't just seeing a temperature, they're seeing a trend, they're seeing a direction, a whole narrative playing out in real time. Okay, so picture this. Two patients, both have a temperature of 102 degrees Fahrenheit. To you or me, they might look pretty much the same. But to that nurse, oh, these are two completely different universes. A steady 102, that might just be a chronic thing, something you manage. But a temperature that just shot up from 99 to 102 in 10 minutes flat, that's not a problem, that's a crisis. It is the speed of that change that sets off every alarm. So that feeling the nurse has, right in their gut, that spike of urgency, that instinct screaming about how fast things are going downhill, that is the derivative. That feeling is what lets them make a life-saving call before things completely fall apart. It's a real-world translation of a fundamental law of the universe. Okay, let's grab that exact same idea, that rate of change, and see what it feels like in a totally different place. We're swapping out the hospital scrubs for a hard hat. Our nurse is now a master builder, whose world is all about physical forces, things like stiffness, slope, and load. Just picture a really cool, curved roof for a second. If you were to place a tiny little ball anywhere on that roof, which way would it roll and how fast would it go? A good builder knows this stuff intuitively. At any single tiny point, there's a very specific slope, a local pitch. And that precise instantaneous angle, well, that's the derivative. It's not the slope of the whole roof, it's the exact slope right here, right now. All right, so from the slow, deliberate world of building, let's rocket over to our most intense example yet. We're jumping into the driver's seat of a race car, where change happens in a blink and everything is just pure physics, vectors, friction, and g-forces. Imagine you're just flying through a hairpin turn. Your velocity isn't just a number on the speedometer, it's got a direction, it's a vector. Now, if at one exact split second your tires lost all their grip, let's say you hit a patch of ice, the car would shoot off in a perfectly straight line. That line, that instantaneous trajectory, that's the derivative. And that's what the driver feels as the line through the corner. It's the razor's edge between total control and total chaos. Okay, we've been to the hospital, the construction site, and the racetrack. We've got our clues. A feeling of urgency, the path of a water droplet, the trajectory of a sliding car. It's time to put it all together. The big reveal is here. So what is it? What's the big secret connection? It's this simple. The nurse, the builder, the driver, they are all sensing the exact same thing. They're feeling the derivative. They are feeling the instantaneous rate of change. Now, this is the definition you'd get in a math class, right? The instantaneous rate of change. But after seeing it in action, it's not just a bunch of abstract words anymore, is it? You can almost feel what it means now. So what's the big deal? Why is looking at it this way so important? Well, because when we pull all these examples together, we're not just learning a math concept. We're actually seeing how a gut-level understanding of change is the key to being an expert at, well, pretty much anything. And this table it nails it. Let's break it down. For the nurse, the thing being measured, the function is temperature. The derivative is how fast it's spiking, which they feel as urgency. For the builder, the function is the roof's shape. The derivative is the local pitch, which they see as how water will run off. And for the driver, the function is their position on the track. The derivative is their instantaneous velocity, which they feel as the perfect line. See? It's the same law, just wearing a different outfit each time. And you know what? There's actually a name for this way of learning. It's called associative encoding. It turns out our brains are way better at learning new abstract information, like calculus, when we can connect it or associate it with a mental model we already get. We're giving a homeless idea a place to live in our minds. So when you look at all these different examples, your brain is doing something pretty amazing. It's called extrapolation. It sees the nurse, it sees the builder, it sees the driver. It finds the pattern that connects all of them, and it builds a universal law. Your brain starts to realize the derivative isn't just some math thing, it's a fundamental law of change that's happening everywhere, all the time. All right, let's bring it all home. The big takeaway here is really about shifting how we see the world and starting to recognize this universal language in our own lives. And that is the big idea here. Calculus was never meant to be just a scary page of symbols in a textbook. It's a language, a powerful language invented to describe the motion and change that's all around us. It describes a patient's health, a stock's value, a storm's intensity, you name it. Which, of course, brings us to the final, most important question. Where in your life, in your job, in your passion, in your hobbies, do you feel an instantaneous rate of change? What's the speed of the thing that matters most to you? Really think about it, because now you have the language to describe it.
You know that feeling when you're working so hard towards a goal, you're making real, measurable progress, but you still feel stuck? Like you've just hit a wall, even though the numbers say you're still inching forward. Well, it turns out that feeling isn't just in your head. It's actually a fundamental concept that we can map out with math. Today, we are diving into the really surprising calculus behind momentum, motivation, and that super frustrating feeling of a plateau.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You start something new. Maybe it's learning guitar or trying to save money, or in our example for today, a weight loss journey. At first, the progress is so exciting, it feels great. But then, it just starts to slow down. You're putting in the same effort, but the results? They're just not what they used to be.
And this, right here, this is the heart of it all. This one single thought just perfectly captures that intuition. Going from 205 down to 200 pounds in 7 weeks, that feels amazing. That's progress. But then, to only lose 1 more pound over the next 7 weeks, that just feels wrong. It feels, like the quote says, not optimal. And that feeling is exactly what we're going to decode.
So, what if I told you that this feeling has a name? One you probably haven't thought about since high school math class. It's the very essence of calculus. And we can actually use it to draw a map of your progress and pinpoint the exact mathematical reason you feel so frustrated. Okay, so first things first, we need a way to see what's happening. In math, we'd use a function. Let's just call it w of t, where w is your weight and t is time. So at time 0, you're at 205 pounds. At 7 weeks, you're at 200 pounds. At 14 weeks, you're at 199. All this function does is turn your whole journey into a simple curve on a graph. Now, when you say I lost 5 pounds in 7 weeks, what you're really looking at is the average change. It's like you're just drawing a straight line from your starting point to your 7-week point. In calculus, we call that a secant line. And it's great for seeing the big picture, the overall average result. But see that not optimal feeling. That's not about the average, it's about how you feel right now, in this very moment. You're sensing the change at a single instant in time. And in calculus, that is the tangent line. It's the slope of the curve at one specific point. Your gut is basically doing calculus, and it's telling you that the slope of that line is getting flatter and flatter. Your progress is stalling in real time.
Okay, so your progress curve is flattening out. We get that. But why does that feel so demotivating? Well, to understand that, we need to talk about not just your speed, but the change in your speed. And for that, we need to talk about derivatives. Let's break this down. It's pretty simple. The first derivative is basically your speed, or your velocity. How fast are you losing weight each week? But the second derivative, that's your acceleration. It tells you if your speed is picking up, slowing down, or staying the same. You see, you're not just sensing your speed, you're sensing whether you're hitting the gas or slamming on the brakes.
This chart just lays the problem out perfectly. Look at that first bar. In the first 7 weeks, your velocity was solid, about 0.7 pounds a week. But then, look at that second bar. In the next 7 weeks, it absolutely crashes down to just 0.14 pounds a week. That huge drop-off, that's the slowdown your brain is totally picking up on.
All right, now this is where it gets a little weird, but stick with me. Even though your weight is going down, the slowdown itself is a kind of upward push. Think about it like hitting the brakes in a car. You're still moving forward, right? But the force of the brakes is working against you. In calculus, we call that braking force a positive second derivative. It's the thing that's causing your curve to bottom out, and it's the mathematical signature of your plateau. So now that we have these basic ideas, we can build this really powerful new vocabulary. And by understanding these terms, we can get super precise about naming every single part of our journey, not just with weight loss, but with literally any goal you can think of.
You know that feeling of being completely stuck? Well, calculus has a name for that. It's called a limit. It's the value that your progress just kind of approaches as time goes on forever. So when your weight loss grinds to a halt and just hovers around 199 pounds, you've hit the limit of your progress. You've hit a plateau.
And what about that exact moment where things started to change? You know that point where your amazing progress first started to lose its magic? That has a name too. It's the point of inflection. It's that little wobble on the curve, the critical instant where your acceleration flipped from positive to negative and the slowdown officially began. So how do we find the best part of the journey? You know, the good old days? Well, that's called optimization. It's a whole branch of calculus dedicated to finding the maximum or the minimum point on a curve. For our weight loss example, optimization would help us pinpoint the exact week where our progress was the absolute fastest, where that derivative was at its peak. But here's the thing. This mathematical language isn't just for a fitness kick. It actually reveals a really fundamental principle for how we experience progress and motivation in every single part of our lives. This pattern is absolutely everywhere. It's universal. In finance, it's not just how much money is in your account, it's the growth rate. In cybersecurity, analysts track the velocity of an attack. A nurse isn't just checking a temperature, they're tracking the rate a fever is spiking. A dancer feels momentum. It is always about the derivative. Which brings us to the most crucial point of all. Our happiness, our satisfaction, isn't just about where we are. It's about where we're going and how fast we feel like we're getting there. We are fundamentally wired to care more about our momentum, our derivative, than our current position, the function value. And that brings us right back to where we started. Hitting 200 pounds is a fantastic achievement, no doubt, but the feeling of satisfaction came from the speed of getting there. The frustration doesn't come from the number on the scale. It comes from that unmistakable, intuitive feeling of the curve flattening out right from under your feet. So the next time you feel stuck, or for that matter, the next time you feel super motivated, try thinking about it this way. Are you looking at the big picture average, the secant line, or are you feeling that instantaneous change, the tangent line? What's the velocity of your career, your learning, your relationships? In other words, what is the derivative in your own life telling you right now? All right, let's talk about motivation, but probably not in the way you're used to. We're not doing inspirational quotes today. Nope, we're talking about the cold, hard math that's secretly running the show. The math that explains why you feel totally on fire one day and then completely stuck the next. You know this feeling, right? You start learning something new, maybe a new diet or a big project at work, and you are just crushing it. Every little bit of progress feels amazing. And then, poof, it just stops feeling good. You're technically still getting better, but that fire, that excitement, it's gone. So why? What is going on there?
And the answer, believe it or not, comes from a subject a lot of us really didn't enjoy in school, calculus. But seriously, stick with me here, because if you stop thinking about calculus as just a bunch of weird symbols and start seeing it as a language that describes our actual lived experience, well, it becomes this incredible tool for understanding ourselves.
Okay, so to crack this motivation mystery, we have to start with a basic idea about our brains. Your brain needs a mental model. You can just think of it as a framework to make sense of anything. Without one, information just bounces right off. That framework has a name. It's called a schema. And what we're going to do here is give you a totally new schema for your own motivation. It's based on what the source material calls the psychophysics of progress. Basically, we're going to learn to feel the math. Let's get into the first big idea, and it's this. There is a huge, huge difference between the facts of your progress and the feeling of your progress. And it turns out, your brain cares way, way more about one of these than the other. Understanding which one, that's the key to everything. And this slide just breaks it down perfectly. Over on the left, you've got position. That's the cold, hard data, right? The total pounds you've lost, the total credits you've earned. But on the right, you have velocity. And that's the rate of change. That's the feeling. That's the high you get from learning something fast or the thrill of seeing results pop up quickly. And that feeling, that velocity, is what your brain is actually wired to care about. So here's the crucial takeaway. Your brain is not a spreadsheet, okay? It's not sitting there logging all your total achievements. It's more like an accelerometer. It is super sensitive to changes in speed. It feels you speeding up,
and it feels you slowing down. It doesn't really care about your static position.
This quote from the source material just nails it. We are wired to respond to movement. So when that feeling of rapid progress, that high velocity, starts to slow down, our motivation signal just tanks, even if, objectively, we're still moving forward.
And this leads us to what is probably the most psychologically dangerous moment in any journey of learning or improvement. It's that point where the momentum shifts, and all of a sudden, everything just feels so much harder.
You can really think of it as a vibe shift. It's that moment the honeymoon phase ends. The initial rush of making quick progress is gone, and the real grind starts to set in. Mathematically, this moment is called the inflection point.
And this is what's so wild about what's happening under the hood. Your velocity is still positive. I mean, you are still getting better, but your acceleration has just turned negative. You've started to hit the brakes. So even though you're still moving forward, it feels like you're slowing down, and that feeling is everything to your brain.
So why does this vibe shift happen? Well, neurologically, it comes down to something called reward prediction error. There's this common myth that dopamine is a reward chemical. It's not really. It's a prediction chemical. It's constantly tracking the difference between the reward you got and the reward you thought you were going to get.
This chart shows it so clearly. At the beginning, your actual progress is constantly blowing past your expectations. So dopamine surges and you feel incredible. But once you hit that inflection point, even though you're still improving, that improvement is now less than what your brain has gotten used to. And the result? A dopamine crash.
And here is the punchline. Your brain takes this completely normal, totally predictable mathematical event, this negative acceleration, and it interprets it as failure. It feels like, this isn't working anymore, when in reality, the system is working exactly like it's supposed to. It's not a character flaw, it's just a derivative mismatch.
So what happens after that inflection point, when you keep grinding away, but the results just get smaller and smaller? You hit a wall. Or, as mathematicians would call it, you hit an asymptote.
A plateau is really just a mathematical limit. It's that point where you can pour in a massive amount of effort and get back just a tiny, almost unnoticeable amount of change. Your progress curve just gets flatter and flatter, getting closer to a ceiling it might never actually touch.
This example from the source is just fantastic. Think about a ballroom dancer. They see these huge, amazing gains in their first 100 hours, but the next 10,000 hours, that might only create a tiny, almost imperceptible improvement in their fluidity. The cost-benefit ratio just becomes psychologically crushing. The derivative, that feeling of progress, is basically zero.
And this, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. If you're stuck on a plateau, just pouring in more and more effort for less and less reward, how in the world do you break through it?
And here is the single most important rule you need to burn into your brain for overcoming a plateau. You cannot brute force a limit. More of the same thing, even if you do 10 times more of it, it's not going to work. It's like trying to run through a brick wall. It's just not going to happen.
So, if more effort isn't the answer, then what is? You have to stop trying to just push harder on the same old variables. Instead, you have to change the function itself. You have to change the entire equation.
So how do you actually do that? Well, the source material gives us some really concrete ideas. Instead of just practicing for longer, you completely alter your practice structure. Instead of doing the same old drills, you go out and find a totally new kind of feedback. Instead of just rereading your notes again, you switch to a completely new way of studying. You have to introduce a new variable to change the math.
Okay, so let's pull this all together into our new mental model. This connects all the dots so beautifully. On the left, you've got the calculus concept. In the middle, you've got what it actually means for your brain. And on the right, you've got a real-world example. From your absolute knowledge being the function, to that feeling of progress being the first derivative, all the way to hitting a wall being a limit. This is your new schema for motivation.
And we'll end with this really powerful idea. That feeling we call burnout, it's not a moral feeling. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a predictable, mathematical phenomenon. It is negative acceleration. Plateaus are not a sign that you've hit your personal limit. They're just a sign that you've hit the limit of your current system. So the next time you feel stuck, don't just tell yourself to push harder. Ask yourself, how can I change the equation?
Okay, let's be honest. Have you ever opened a calculus textbook and felt like you were trying to read a foreign language? You see all these words, you know they're supposed to mean something important, but it all just feels like a secret code. Well, today, we're not just going to learn the code. We're going to build your own personal translation key.
You're not alone if it does. It's a super common feeling.
You get hit with this wall of words that sound incredibly complex and intimidating, and it's so easy to think, wow, the math must be really hard. But what if the problem isn't the concepts themselves? What if it's just the words we use to describe them? And that's the big idea for today. Once you realize that some of these math words are just, well, poorly chosen, you can activate what the source material calls a jargon detector. You start looking past the scary-sounding term to find the simple, beautiful idea that's hiding right underneath. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about the language problem itself. Then, we are going to tackle 3 of the biggest jargon hurdles in calculus: the integral, differentiable, and the asymptote. And finally, we'll put your brand new translation key to the test. You know, the real issue here is something called semantic friction. It's a great term. It's basically when the word choice actively gets in the way of you understanding the concept. It creates this mental barrier that makes a really simple idea feel way more complicated than it needs to be. Today, we're smoothing all that out. All right, let's dive in with our first major term, the integral. It sounds so important, so grand, but what is it actually doing? Think about it. In everyday conversation, we say something is integral to a plan, right? It means it's absolutely essential. So when you hear that word in a math class, your brain automatically braces for something deeply complex, something really fundamental. But here's the reality. An integral is just a running total. That's it. It's just an accumulator. It's the final score, the total amount of whatever you're measuring, the sum of everything up to a certain point. It's not about some deep complexity. It's just about accumulation. And this is the perfect contrast to its partner, the derivative. Imagine a faucet dripping into a bucket. A derivative is like your speed right now, that split-second rate at which the water is dripping. But the integral? The integral doesn't care about the speed. It just cares about the final result. It's simply the total amount of water in that bucket after an hour. One is the rate, the other is the total. Okay, so from accumulation, let's move to our next big word, differentiable. It is an absolute mouthful, I know, but the concept behind it is surprisingly intuitive. I like to call it the no-jerk rule. The word itself really sets a trap for your brain. Differentiable sounds a whole lot like differentiate, to tell things apart. But its mathematical meaning has absolutely nothing to do with that, which is exactly why it's so confusing. So what's the real meaning? It's incredibly simple. Differentiable just means smooth. That's the translation. A function is differentiable if its graph is a smooth, flowing curve with no sharp corners, no spikes, and no sudden breaks. Simple as that. Imagine you're walking along a path. If you have to make a sudden, sharp 90-degree turn, that corner is non-differentiable. And why is that? Because your motion has a sudden jerk. At that one single point, your direction changes instantly. The math just can't pin down a single rate of change right there. But a smooth, flowing curve, one that moves like a dancer's arm, that is differentiable everywhere because there are no sudden, jerky changes in direction. It's just one continuous, predictable flow. Our final piece of jargon today is the asymptote. And this one might be the most intimidating sounding of them all. But I promise, its nickname, the ultimate tease, gives you a pretty big clue as to what it really does. I mean, seriously, asymptote just sounds weird, right? It sounds like something a doctor would tell you about or a piece of gear you'd find in a lab. It gives you 0 hints about its meaning and just sounds complicated for the sake of it. The real translation is so much cooler. Think of an asymptote as a line, a kind of ghost wall that a curve gets closer and closer and closer to, but never, ever actually touches. It's a limit, a boundary that you can approach forever, but never quite reach. Here's a great example. Let's say you're trying to lose weight, and your body has a natural limit at, say, 195 pounds. You diet, and you get down to 195.1. You work even harder, you get to 195.01. Harder still, 195.001. You keep getting closer and closer, adding another 0 after the decimal, but you can never mathematically get to exactly 195. That 195-pound line is your asymptote. So there we have it. We've decoded the big 3. We've turned all this confusing jargon into simple, intuitive concepts. This is your new translation key. Now, let's see just how powerful this thing is. Okay, picture this. You're sitting in a lecture. The professor says this sentence, and you can almost feel the collective panic rising in the room. It sounds so dense, so abstract, so hard. This is the exact moment most people's brains just kind of shut down, but not yours. Not anymore.
because this is what you hear now. You automatically translate it in your head. Integral just becomes running total, and differentiable function becomes smooth flow. All of a sudden, it's not scary anymore, is it? It's just a simple, clear instruction.
And this is the real breakthrough here. You're not just memorizing terms anymore. You're actively translating the abstract language of calculus into the concrete, relatable language of human experience. You're basically adding your own subtitles in your head, and that lets you bypass all the mental friction that trips everyone else up. But this isn't really just about calculus. This skill, the skill of detecting jargon and translating it back to its simple, core concept, it applies everywhere. In business, in technology, even in art. The world is just full of needlessly complex language that's hiding simple ideas. So my question to you is, what's the next piece of jargon you're going to translate?